kick it off to my colleague and good friend, Doug Spry, shortly. But before we get started, I'm just curious, how many STEM students do we have here? Okay, very interesting. Y'all are great. That's like a unique thing. That's awesome that you're here for a debate about AI and deliberation. How many social science, humanities folks do we have here? Okay, nice. And how many faculty members do we have here? Awesome. Well, it's great to be here. Just so you know, for context, I came in from Jacksonville, Wyoming yesterday to Ithaca, New York. Coming from Jacksonville to Ithaca is like you grab a pack mule, you go on a river ride, and then you hail a couple of taxis, and then you make it to some hotel in Ithaca. So I'm grateful to be here with you, and I'm glad that, please welcome, I'm glad that we're here today with this amazing opportunity, this event. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about why any of this actually matters. Like, why are we here? Doug is a fantastic colleague who will actually moderate the conversation, the debate, but as Dr. Sanger introduced, I lead a national organization called Bridge USA, which is the largest student-led dialogue movement in the country. We have over 108 college chapters, we have 41,000 students, but I actually want to take you back to a day that changed the trajectory of my life, February 2nd, 2017. So I was a college freshman, I was a pre-med student. My mom is still confused. She's like, maybe you should have been a doctor. I'm like, honestly, at this point, it would be easier. And February 2nd, 2017, I was walking past my math seminar, and I very distinctly remember in the distance, helicopters, fires, protests. Now again, this is UC Berkeley, so this is sort of par for the course. This isn't like profoundly, different. But there was something very different about that. I walked past a cafe, and the cafe's window was broken in. And inside, there was a TV screen, and it said, CNN, UC Berkeley students protest free speech. Now, I was a pre-med student, didn't really know what a lot of that meant, but what was crazy about that moment was that there was a film crew from CNN that was filming that moment standing right next to me. And that was sort of the breaking of the fourth wall. That's where we went from feeling like, you got politics, you got all this stuff going on, you go from an observer to an actual participant. So the next day, me and some random people are now some of my best friends, we got together and we said, we're just picking up the campus trash. We're picking up the tree that was burnt down. We walked past an Amazon store that had been smashed in, which, by the way, that was the one unifying thing that everyone agreed on. It's like, at least the Amazon store got popped. And we met in this student circle, right? And this student had this idea. He was like, what if we invited the protested and the protesters to have a conversation? Very naive idea. You're telling me a week after the largest protest in Berkeley's history since the 60s, when Dr. King came to campus, the university experienced significant damage and problems. Protesters had a real reason to protest. The people that felt protested had real legitimate grievances. That you're going to get people to actually come into a room and listen. Very naive. So in a week, we got our first conversation going. We printed all these flyers. We got everybody together. And we called it Bridge Berkeley. The logo was the Golden Gate Bridge. 75 people showed up, 30 people left in the first minute. Why? Because they thought it was a civic architecture project. So, just to tell you where all this started. Next week, we rehosted that conversation. And those same people showed up. And you know that feeling? I know a lot of us feel it on campus, a lot of us feel it teaching class, a lot of us feel it as administrators, liberal, conservative, doesn't matter. It's just a human being feeling. Is people sitting there with genuine fear, concerns, nervousness, eggshells. That feeling that I think is very alien in a democracy. I think we can all agree with that. So my friend Ross, who's our co-founder and chief operating officer, had this beautiful idea because we didn't exactly know how to break the ice. Again, you had like a pre-med guy, you had an architecture guy, you had an engineer, and you had a couple of poli-sci people. And no one in class was teaching us how to navigate this moment in democracy, so we had to figure it out on our own. So he had this brilliant idea. It's very simple. He said, forget politics and policy, let's lead with vulnerability. Let's just break the room's ice and let's talk about each other's families. Where are you from? Why are you here? Why did you leave class to go protest? Tell me more. And man, the next 75 minutes changed the trajectory of my life because I saw that we radically overestimate the power of our divisions and we radically underestimate the power of a conversation. So you should probably be asking yourself, well, that's great, Manu. That sounds brilliant. That even sounds a little cliche and naive, but Have you turned on the news recently? Like, what happened in those 7 years? So, I'm going to take you back to a month and a half ago. Give you a little bit of context about the power of these types of debates and events. And then we're going to get the debate kicked off, because I want us to know that this matters in a broader context. So, a month and a half ago, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And, people have very different views of that. We had to do a whole press tour talking about that, sadly. We had students from across the political spectrum. We had students at community colleges. We had vocational tech schools. We had elite Ivy League schools. We had a moment of crisis. But within that moment of crisis, tragically, there's actually a lot of hope. I want to tell you about this. The people in my generation are going to relate to this part. After Charlie was tragically assassinated, we added 100 followers an hour for the next 30 straight days. 65,000 followers in 32 days. Zero ad spend. We had students from across the country raising their hands saying, I want to have a conversation about AI. It doesn't even have to be politics. Different parts of American society. Saying, this is going too far. Liberal, conservative, it doesn't matter. The two lawmakers before that had been tragically assassinated in Minnesota. You saw a spurt of political violence, and there's this one common theme that all of our students share. Why does dialogue matter? Because our lives depend on it. And that is the saving grace of the moment we're in right now. As our students mobilized after the Israel-Palestine protests, we worked with amazing organizations like Braver Angels, ACTA, people from across the groups, spectrums. The two thoughts I'll leave you with on why this matters, beyond the literal lives and democracy that our country depends on, is that first, imagine I told you there's a society out there of 330 million people, all of whom look differently than each other, different backgrounds, different views, different standpoints, heavily armed, trying to make it work in the context of human history. When you look at humanity on the scope of 10,000 years, 50,000 years, 75,000 years, 200,000 years, the dominant norm was violence. It was the idea that you meet difference not with words, but with conflict. The United States over the last 250 years is an awesome aberration to the reality of the human condition. And I think when young people in my generation think about the power of debate and dialogue, I think one of the things we have to realize is that as we circle 250th anniversary next year, the United States is about 250 years old, which sounds like a long time. But the Roman Empire lasted for 1,800 years. The Chinese dynasties lasted for 1,500 years. Athenian democracy lasted for 400 years. We're not at the end of the American experiment, we're at the beginning. So the question becomes, number two, how do you actually carry that experiment forward? And the students that I work with on a daily basis stand up courageously and say that we need civil disobedience in society, we need protests in society, we sometimes even need violence. But the question is, what is the right tool for the moment today? What is the right tool for the moment today? We were having this conversation earlier. You got a lot of toolkits. The greatest social change makers in the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi, salt marches in 45, to Martin Luther King, 60, civil rights, to Nelson Mandela, South Africa. What they all understood was that democracy is a puzzle with a lot of tools. And I think the tragedy of the moment is that we've convinced an entire generation, frankly, we've convinced our political apparatus that the only way you win today is by turning on your base and standing on the side of conflict. And I think what our students are proving on a daily basis is that the courageous act of conversation is actually countercultural. It's countercultural. It's revolutionary. It's a rebellion. I know the provost here. It's an FU to the outrage industrial complex. And you are on the front lines of that. The feeling when Doug called me, I think it was 4 or 5 months ago, he said, hey, I'd like you to do some talks at the end of some of these debates. I was a little bit reticent because a lot of our time these days is spent on the road working with politicians, working with a lot of people in other different spaces. Bless you. And, but I told Deb I would agree to this because these are honestly some of the most hope-filled experiences I have. And as Doug shared, you feel this on campuses and on topics across the country. So I'm just going to wrap with 2 stories. And these 2 stories are actually reflected off of this debrief that we just heard. The first is I sense a little bit of desire to feel like we left off on, we wanted more. We wanted the debate to continue a little bit more. I think 3 or 4 people got cut off. Praveen mentioned there's a deeper question to ask. That is amazing because this is just the start of something that you can do. The question that should be in your mind is what next? What next? And that question should come from the phase of this feeling of ineptitude because, oh my God, we just had a conversation, but how does this change the world out there? Like, is anyone wondering that? Like, great, we had a good conversation, so what? Is anyone wondering that? No one's wondering that. Everyone's satisfied? Please?
I'm slightly sitting involved in media for years, so it tends to be my nature.
Don't worry, I started off as a pre-med student, so I'm, it's only up from here.
But what's running through my mind is this is a very self-selecting group, right? And how is that when we were talking about, we're on a conservative campus, that's a very different setting. But are all of the groups that are coming to these, are they self-selecting? Are we not having the real extremes on both sides and having conversations? How much does this move the meter if we're self-selecting for people who are willing to listen to other sides of the argument?
Yeah.
So I guess.
What was your name? Ellen. So the reason I love coming to college campuses is because that's where you actually get the real harder questions. The media people are great, but they skirt around the issues a little bit. And I'll actually make your question even more pointed, which is we just engage the people that want to come to a debate, but what about everybody else? Right? That's the harsher and I think more direct version of the question. I want to take you back to Gettysburg College. One of the first times I've really experienced this debate in July of 2023. Never go to Gettysburg in the summer. It's hot and humid and a little sweaty. And we showed up to not actually campus, but local community, and the debate topic that the community proposed was, is America the greatest country in the world? Way to bridge a divide, right? And it was a self-selecting topic of community members. So it was not advertised, it was part of a convention called the Bravery Angels Convention, one of our other partner organizations. People showed up, and I think, Doug, you were there at that event too. And Ellen, is your name? There was 2 people halfway through that debate. One of them stood up, this older white woman, and she stood up with tears in her eyes. And she was like, her hands were shaking, and she started saying, similar to the way that you got emotional tonight. She said, how dare we ask this question? My son was a veteran in the global war on terror. My uncle fought in Vietnam. My grandparents, both my grandparents, fought the Nazis in Europe while we had our freedom to do what we wanted. How dare you ask this question? And my hands started shaking. I was like, man, I really should have been a doctor. Because talk about 2 speakers later, this African-American gentleman stands up. And he says something along the lines of, while your grandparents were fighting the Nazis in Europe, my grandparents couldn't drink out of the same water fountain. And now I'm like, all right. And debate continued, dialogue continued. Neither of these 2 people, frankly, not only would they have not shown up, they didn't have the time in their lives. And this is where I'll take in the second story after this one. Like, how do you actually drive people's time? In the debrief like this, the woman stands up because then there was a big discussion about this conversation. And she says, looks directly at him, and she says, while I still believe this is the greatest country in the world, I want to apologize to you for the sins of my grandparents. The room was dead silent. The gentleman immediately stands up because he felt this sense of guilt, fear, a feeling that she herself felt evil. And he said, that the fact that we actually reach this level of understanding where you see my pain and I see your pain, I actually believe that this enables the United States to be the greatest country in the world. Now, this story is not about is the United States the greatest country in the world or not? The story is about the fact that the human condition, I think, is universal, and whether you're a loud vocal minority on the extreme, or you're a silent member of the silent majority, most people, I think, in this room and people outside that are kind of exhausted and just tired, I think that the human condition demands a desire to be connected. And so this is how you get people that are not coming to these spaces to actually show up. And that's where I think the students have a big responsibility, and I think that's where the administration's got a big responsibility. Bridge USA chapters don't actually operate like this. We'll do events like this, but the student chapters are actually totally external to a campus community. And what a student chapter does is a student chapter thinks about how do you build an identity that is bigger than left-right, that is central to this idea that we are builders right now. And when you can make this popular in grassroots with young people, that's powerful. I started this thing, I'll end with this right now, which is that when we started this work in 2017, I called it the years of toiling away in obscurity, where no one gave a shit. Because the problem was not that significant. Today, if you have a conversation, you are the courageous one. That is the counterculture. I never thought in my life, Alan, that you would see protests for civic dialogue. Because the story of America is, I think, just about selecting the right tools for the right moment. This is not like dialogue is universally the thing to do. For those of you that know history, Churchill would have been a terrible president for peacetime. Abraham Lincoln would have been a terrible president leading the UK into war against the Nazis. It's all about the moment. And so I think young people are looking for something that is disruptive, unique, countercultural. And the last thing I'll say on the question of AI is we host this annual summit everywhere, all these students. Think about it like Turning Point USA, but for this type of work. And you get students from across the political spectrum, and they're ready to fight. They got real arguments. They're standing there, they're like, yo, this is what I believe, this is what I believe. It's no BS conflict. But they know that they're standing for a counterculture. And when young people feel like they're on the cutting edge of something unique, and then administrations suddenly feel like they've got that strength of, oh my God, the students actually believe this. The silent majority of students, it's powerful. This is not an attack on protests, it's not an attack on violence. You need everything, honestly, depending on the moment. But it's a question of what's needed now. And you have a society of 350 million people, all of whom are diverse with different viewpoints, heavily armed, trying to make it work. Ask yourself, what do we think is the tool for the moment? And so you have a huge power in what's next. If you leave today unsatisfied, that's amazing. Harness that. And we'll do more debates, we'll do more events, and we'll bring more people, we'll build a chapter, we'll grow stuff, because I think this is the tool for the moment. And we are all part of the counterculture. Thank you, everybody. Good.